Hey guys, Stealth here. Today looking at the M270 ATACMS. Now you've probably seen this thing around, maybe you've used it yourself, but I wanted to give it a review because I've seen people use it in not exactly the right way it was supposed to be used. This unit is an artillery unit with a 105 kilometer range, very low dispersion, the lowest dispersion on any artillery unit, and a very high AP power of 20. Now these things will destroy any vehicle with one shot, but they have some setbacks. They have a minimum range of 8.5 kilometers, so you cannot fire them at something that's right in front of them. They also take an incredibly long time to load, and they take a lot of supplies. So if you're using these things, make sure you have an FOB, because loading one missile takes about 1500 units of supplies. Now to test these guys out, I had to set up a deck myself, and the units over here, which you're going to see, are going to get destroyed in this video. Because the AI of course wasn't patient enough to just sit around with a couple of units. So over here I have a couple of Sheridans, 35 point tanks. These are very soft targets, of course. Very low top armor of only 1. Next to those we have M1A1s, 3 top armor, 120 point tanks. And finally I have an M1A2, 4 top armor. Still not a match for the M270 ATACMS. Now, I have a couple of those guys here, but these things still prove to be too close. So this is less than 8.5 kilometers. You need to space these units out a bit more. So you see me drive this M270 back, right up until it gets enough minimum range to get a shot on those things. Come on buddy, bit more. Oh, sorry guys, I was going to use this one. I thought I was going to use that one. Anyway. Now it starts to fire, and what I've seen a lot of people do is fire both missiles at the same target. That is absolutely not required. One missile will definitely destroy your target, whichever it is, except infantry. You're going to see that later on in the video. This thing does not do anything against infantry because it has 0 HE power. So the moment you want to fire one of these, micromanage them. Have them under a hotkey, have them fire one shot and then manually stop them from firing. Because one missile is definitely going to be enough. So, fires, I stop it immediately. Weapon underway. Now before it hits, I was aiming for these 2 Sheridans. I had aimed it right here on the ground. So I was not intending to hit these M1 Abrams. Instead, this happens. Two Sheridans get destroyed easily, so that's 70 points down. 120 points get added to that because the missile hit so close to the Abrams that it got utterly destroyed. So this is already 190 points worth of damage that this thing has done with one shot. Now keep in mind these things come at 150, so they're not cheap, but they will, if you use them correctly, earn themselves back pretty quickly. Just make sure you don't fire 2 missiles, because the less missiles you fire, the more you micromanage these things, the more effective they're going to be. And if I would have fired 2 missiles, it would have been overkill, and this thing would have been out of play for about 5 minutes, which is a long time in this game. So that was at least 3 tanks, and this one took quite a bit of damage, and of course it got panicked. This one was not hit, it was not impacted at all, so it doesn't take any damage and it's still calm. Now, that was some medium and cheap tanks. So let's have a look at what happens when you fire this thing at a super heavy. Weapon is away. And there you go. I was aiming right on top of this Abrams and this thing was still too close. So he now scored 300 points here, 190 there. So this unit has earned itself back 2.5 times by now. This is how quickly you can get those guys to perform well. Now I get it back to the FOB and just watch. This thing starts to load at time index 928. And meanwhile we're going to look at the other guy. We're just going to keep an eye on this M270 to see how fast it's going to load. This one starts to fire at this group of helicopters which are hovering low over ground. This is not actually a normal artillery target, at least most people wouldn't consider it, but you can actually hit these things. And considering that the M270 missile explodes overhead and then drops cluster munitions, just watch what happens to these helicopters. Here comes the missile. Again, I already fired one. Bang. 3 70-point helicopters down. So again, in one shot, that unit earned itself its own prize pack. Now, I also have another group, and he's already aiming for them. I am now going for another group, and I wanted to see how much splash range this thing has. So I got 4 LAVMs, 4 mortar carriers here, and 1 CEV. I'm going to fire it right in the middle, just to see how much damage this thing can do. Here comes the missile. And it manages to destroy the tank on the outside of the explosion. It destroys 1 LAV, and the rest is worried, just from the sheer blast of that. So you can get about, I don't know, a 50 meter splash radius. It says it has dispersion, yeah, sorry, that's not 50 meters. We can just look that up. It has a dispersion of 910, so it will disperse all those cluster munitions over about a kilometer range. Now, I started loading this thing at 928, and by now it has only loaded 1 missile. So you can expect to load about 1 missile per second, or sorry, per minute. And let's see how much supplies it has taken. It has taken so far almost 2,000 points of supplies, which for the damage it has done is not very much, because you could have achieved pretty much the same thing using different kinds of artillery. Now, I already start to aim it at the next target, and it will aim up until a certain point, and this is where it stops, because the weapons platform itself is still reloading. It has munitions to fire another rocket, and now it has 2. Let's see how much it took for that. A little over 2,000. Probably also 16 points for the fuel. So, this guy has loaded 2 missiles. It's like the missiles are on the craft, they're on the vehicle, but they're not actually in the launchers yet. So that is why these things take a long time to aim. Now at about 10:30 I started to aim, or started to load rather. Speed it up to 10 times. So 11:30, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, or 3.5 to 4 minutes. That's how long it took. Now this next test is going to show you what it can do to a vehicle and infantry in the open. I guess you can expect what's going to happen to the vehicle, but I want to highlight what's happening to infantry. What I have here is the V-150, which transported the Delta Force and the Delta Force themselves. Vehicle of course gets utterly destroyed. Delta Force does not take a single hit. The only thing it does is panic them. So this is not a very good target for the M270. If you see people firing M270s at a town in multiplayer because they want to disrupt the infantry in there, yeah, it will panic them, but it will do absolutely 0 damage. Now over here I have some more infantry and another V-150, and you can of course guess what's going to happen to the infantry and what's going to happen to the V-150. Get this guy into position. Missile comes flying in. Slow it down to 1 time. Again, panicked, but no damage. Vehicle gets destroyed. So, a couple of pointers when using these M270. Make sure you're firing at a high value target. These things need to hit something that's worth at least a combined point value of 200 to 300 before they're effective. Also, make sure you only fire 1 missile at a time. Do not fire 2 because it's overkill. Anything will die to 1 shot, even the heaviest of tanks, as you've seen here with the M1A2. That was a 180 point tank and it only took 1 missile to destroy that. So only fire 1 of these missiles at a time. These things have a ground range of 105 kilometers. So you can fire them all across the map, but you cannot fire them up close because they have a minimum range of 8 kilometers. So that means that if something was inside this town, some vehicles maybe, or some say ATGM carriers were in here, I could not fire at those with this M270 because it's too close. This unit is not very mobile, off-road or on-road. Yeah, on-road of course it's okay. Keep this thing moving. Once you've fired, people are going to recognize what exactly you're going to fire at them, and they will try to fire back at you. So the moment you've fired, queue in order to move this thing. Because if you don't, it'll get destroyed, and that's going to cost you 150 points. In a normal 1v1, I would not use these things because I don't think they're worth it. But in a 10v10, in which you're playing, say, a support deck, which I would recommend you having a look at the support deck video I made earlier if you haven't seen that yet. Anyway, I suggest you perform an AA role or support your teammates using all sorts of support units. So make sure they can focus on offensive units while you focus on defending towns, etc. In that case, you have enough time to micromanage these M270s. Otherwise, I'd really not recommend using these, because they take up quite a bit of supplies. As you can see, I reloaded 2 of these, and it took almost a third of my FOB. So those things are really resource intensive. Again, make sure you move after every shot, because if I have one of these things firing at me, I will always return fire. Now with this video I also wanted to cover, because they're pretty much the same unit, the Russian counterpart, which is a Russian artillery unit which fires pretty much the same sort of rounds. The only difference is that the thing has a little less AP power. So whereas this thing will destroy super heavies, super heavy tanks, those things will not. Make sure you fire those at lighter targets. And again, they fire faster and they come at a lesser price, or at a lower price point. So make sure you use those things for the right target. These things go after high value targets, mind the minimum range, move after every shot and fire 1 missile at a time. And always consider, is this the best unit in my deck to go after a target like that? Of course you can use them just because they can, but I would generally recommend that you look in your deck what other unit you could use to perform the same role, because there are some units. And finally, keep in mind this thing is a prototype unit, so you can have these things only when using the Americans or when using their Russian counterparts. You cannot use these things in the general NATO deck, and you only get 2 per deck. They take up 1 card, and that's a card in the support category. Is it really worth having this unit in the deck you're using for that particular game, or could you use another artillery platform such as maybe the Paladin or the M109A3, which is another howitzer which could do pretty much the same job? This thing is a specialty weapon. Use it in exactly its role it's intended for, and it's going to serve you very well. I hope you found this video useful. I'm sorry I had to sacrifice some of my own units, but the AI just wouldn't sit still. So that's why I went to fire on my own units. But don't worry, I won't do that to you if we're playing multiplayer together. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.